What is going on, YouTube? Northeast Ohio Sports Cards back for an NBA video. I know. It's been a while. We were doing some Marvel, and then we were doing some baseball, and then the select thing happened. But back to my roots. Everybody relax. We're talking some basketball. And we're talking about the dip. It's been discussed a ton on the channel and everywhere else that modern prices are way down in most cases, other than a few players. And vintage / all-time greats / junk wax all-stars are way up. But in my opinion, at some point in time, the pendulum is going to swing back to modern. And in my opinion, some of these prices have fallen a bit too far. Now, are we buying in at the floor? Who knows? Anyone's guess. But I think enough has come off that even if it goes down a little bit more, that in the longer run, you'll end up being okay. So even if it loses like another 5 or 10%, over the next 6 months, I think the potential's there for it to go up to either cash out in the playoffs or whatever, or hold into the offseason, into the next season, depending on the player. I kind of went a little bit across the board here with the guys. So before we get into the nitty gritty YouTube stuff down below, like, comment, sub, you guys know the drill. We'll be using market movers a bunch today. And once again, links to that are down below, as well as an Amazon affiliate link and a coupon code for market movers. So now that we got all that wonderful crap out of the way, let's get into it. So I got two obvious ones. Two, I'm not going to call them off the wall, but I'll call them non-obvious. And then one, I'm going to call it a flyer. So we're going with a 5. Nice little list of 5. I'm not going to call it top 5. These are just my 5. As always on the channel, I recommend that you do your own research. This is just what I believe in and what I am seeing, but you should do your own homework before making any buying decisions. And all these cards that I'm going to talk about aren't things I'm necessarily running out to purchase today, but I am keeping my eye on them. And if prices reach a certain point, and in some cases they're already at that point, I will be looking to make moves. So number one, let's go with the two obvious ones first. Luka, but specifically his optic. Now, if you're in the market for Prism, his PSA 10 is basically at a near all-time low, at least recent low, of around $1,300. That has come way down. The floor is about $1,200 for the last 6 to 8 months or so, back pre-summer rise up. But $1,200 to $1,300 for a PSA 10 Prism Luka is extremely reasonable. And as I've mentioned before, the Dallas Card Show a couple weeks ago, they were going for $1,100 cash. $1,100 cash, if you could find that deal somewhere, I think, in my opinion, is instant buy. But I am long-term on Luka. So I believe in Luka for years on end, not just this season. So if the Mavs continue to have a bumpy ride, I'm fine with that. And once again, this is fairly obvious. I'm not breaking any new ground here saying go buy Luka on the low. Like, duh. I specifically like his optic. I prefer his optic to his Prism. I think it is a better looking card. It's a more reasonable price point. They're right around $600 right now, and I bet you could probably get it under that on a cash deal. Or maybe on a Facebook deal, 500, 550 maybe, or at a card show, maybe you can get someone down to 500. That card for around that price seems like a no-brainer. It was almost $1,000 card at one point during his all-time highs. And my appeal here is the population count. We've talked about this a billion times. 3,500 of the optics compared to 16,000 of the Prisms. Here's the one thing that the recent trend should teach us. And I don't know if it's going to transfer over when the money swings back. But the reason people are chasing the legends and the GOATs and all that stuff. The reason the 90s stuff is going crazy is because population counts are low. And they're all-time great players. Don't get me wrong, that helps too. But the population counts on this 90s stuff and 80s stuff is extremely low. There's just not a lot of them to go around. And that's been the appeal for people. So when that money swings back, are pop counts going to matter more? My theory is maybe. We've seen some of it because as I made the video last week, I believe that was last week, I don't remember, the Zion video that I did back in, February 3rd. So 7 days ago, depending on when this posts. I talked about how Select was holding value extremely well. And I believed it was because, one, Select gets a lot of hobby buzz, but two, the population counts are very appealing. And I'm wondering just how much those are starting to matter if people have finally seen the light at the end of the tunnel going after this 90s and older stuff, that pop counts really do matter and it can really drive demand. Maybe it won't on the modern stuff because no matter what, there's always the looming specter of 20,000 base cards of Prism floating around out there. But if population counts ever matter, especially on someone I am long-term on, Luka, 3,500 of them in a PSA 10 optic is very appealing to me for anything around $500. So eBay sales, I would like this to get a little bit cheaper, but if I could find one off eBay for around 500, I would be a buyer. And this is coming from someone that already owns 2 PSA 10s, an SGC 10, and at least 1 raw copy, maybe 2. I don't remember. I love this card. It's my favorite Luka card for base cards. It's not even close. We've talked about it a ton. Second, obvious one. Didn't take a lot of work to figure this one out. Trae Young. And the exact same thing applies. Everything I just said about Luka applies to Trae. His optic population count on his PSA 10 is 1,400. I own none of these in a 10, but I do own a couple 9s. But I would be looking to get into some 10s at current prices or less. And his Prism at around 9,000 pop count is way lower than Luka's, but will probably climb as more and more people grade Trae. But that's down to $500. $500 for a Trae PSA 10 Prism. Hawks are making the playoffs. If he has a playoff run, like, that card's going to go up. I don't care if the money's swinging on a monitor or not. Once the NBA playoffs roll around, that money's going to swing back. The attention span of the money pool, as we talked about in the Zion video, is on other things right now. So in theory, we should be buying this stuff because the eyeballs are on the legends and the GOATs, was on football, and now it's going to swing over probably to baseball a little bit. I don't think a ton because the baseball market's not huge, but those eyeballs are going to shift over to baseball now that football's ended. The basketball money is still going to hang out in vintage, but once again, at some point, that's going to come back. And I want to buy the players low that I know that the money is going to flow to. Trae Young and Luka are extremely liquid. And if the money comes back in, those are the guys that are going to go up. And like I said before, you can't tell me that if Trae Young has a monster playoff game series, couple games, that his prices are not going to go ballistic. At $500 for a Prism, I'm interested. Anything sub 500, I'm really interested. The optic sitting at around 215 looks like they probably go from anywhere from 215 to 250. There's a little bit of fluctuation there. If I could get one of those for 200, even 250, is probably pretty smart. Anything in that range is probably a pretty good buy. And once again, same thing. Population count is what I'm going to here. That's the reason why I'm targeting the optic. Plus, I could buy 2 optics for the price of a Prism. But I just don't see how Trae's prices go down. So let's go. I'm not going to call it more off the wall because, like I said, these two are the most obvious things in the world. Pascal Siakam. Told you we were going a little off the wall. He's had a topsy-turvy last 6 months, really, since the NBA bubble. Pre the NBA shutting down for the pandemic, he was playing out of his mind. The NBA shut down. They came back, and he played terribly in the bubble. Okay. Mini off season comes. They're right back at it again, and they're basically in a bubble again. Remember, guys, Toronto's playing in Tampa Bay. That's the Tampa Bay Raptors. It's the Tom Brady Raptors. And he did not play well to start the season. He's really started to play well lately. They are probably going to be a playoff team, and he's starting to put up big numbers again. Once again, the appeal here is population count and previous price history. Obviously, everyone knows Luka and Trae's price histories, but let's look at Siakam's. His Optic PSA 10. And this card, once again, I'm talking about Optic again. For me, I'm more interested in the Optic than the Prism, but a lot of that is due to price point because it's lower risk for potentially a pretty decent reward. His Optic PSA 10 population count is 318. His Prism population count's 375. That is nothing. That is literally nothing in the grand scheme of things. Let's look at his prices. So today, the Prism's going for about $200. The Optic's going for $75. It costs almost $30 to grade a card now. So for an extra $40, I could get a PSA 10 Siakam. I'm intrigued. At $200 for his Prism and a pop count of 375. I'm intrigued. You know, look at where these cards were. In the summer, here's August 24th, not that long ago. His Prism base was going for $900 and his Optic was going for around $400. Now, that was peak of the NBA pricing. If you want to call it a bubble, we'll call it a bubble. Inflationary period, whatever magical economic term you want to toss at it. That's when prices were at an all-time high. So I get it, but it at least shows what the ceiling is. Even in September, his Prism was 365, and his Optic was 150. And that's after it dropped way off. That's still almost double your money. On the Optic, it is double your money, 75 to 150. And on the Prism, that's $150 to $160 profit if it just gets back to those levels. We're not even asking for it to go back to here. So to me, this seems way too cheap, especially $75 for his Optic. That seems insanely cheap for that. I'm very intrigued by these Siakam prices. Plus, you mix in the population count, I'm really intrigued. Let's go for another one, slightly off the wall. Karl-Anthony Towns, PSA 10 Prism. You could look at his select stuff too. I didn't pull it up. I just stuck with Prism on this one. 1,200 on the population report. He has just had one of the worst years a person can have. You know, he had his grandmother pass away, all the off-season stuff, just general life stuff of 2021. And then he got COVID. Like, of NBA players, he's not had a great year. He's only played a few games this season. But prior to this mess, whenever he's on the court, he puts up monster numbers. And he's back any day. And this one's a little bit more of a longer term hold because I don't necessarily think they're probably not making the playoffs, most likely, especially in the loaded West. But he can come back, put up some pretty good numbers, maybe get a little bit of buzz, and the price goes up. This is more about the run up in the next season, and maybe this dips lower between now and then. But I like the risk for this one. This is sitting at about $320. At one point back in the summer, this was almost a $500 card, $450 card. And long term, like if you're talking multiple years, which I really don't necessarily like speculating out that far when it comes to NBA, I just have to imagine at some point in time, he is going to demand a trade and want to get off the Timberwolves and to a contending team. And when that happens, his prices are going to go nuts. And you could sell before he even plays a game for them. Now, once again, that's a long-term hold. But I do think he has a decent upside in the short term. No one's seen him for a while. If he comes back and starts putting up huge games, who knows what happens. But I've always kind of had a soft spot for Cat in regards to his cards. I have a few of them, no PSA 10s. I have some raw prisms, a couple selects, nothing crazy. I actually had a courtside select PSA 10 that I bought and sold of his over the summer for one of my better flips. But so I'm not like not tied to him specifically, but I just always thought his stuff was intriguing to me just based off the numbers that he could put up. And that seems like a pretty decent price for a low population count card. Last but not least, we are going to go with something a little bit more long-term / prospecting. Cam Johnson of the Phoenix Suns. I really liked what I saw out of him out of the bubble. I was big on him heading into this season. I'm still big on him now. I really think what happened was his playing time just got squeezed because they brought in Chris Paul and kind of rebuilt that rotation with Jay Crowder. And it kind of took a little bit of his playing time, which was just enough to take minutes away from him to impact his stuff and kind of keep him off everybody's radar. But when you see these prices of his PSA 10 Prism, I just don't know how you're not interested. It is down to $55. It costs, as I mentioned earlier, $20 to $30 to grade at a 4 to 6 month turnaround time. I will take a chance on any decent rookie with a pulse for $50 in a PSA 10. This one, you could go both ways on this. I would be perfectly fine buying up 4 of these for $200, sticking them in a box and forget about him. Just forget about them until next year or the year after. Just stick them in there every once in a while, check the price, see what happens. Or you could probably buy these, stick them in the box, and see if what happens in the playoffs. If he has a big moment in the playoffs and the Suns are making the playoffs, maybe they make a deep run. That's a pretty talented team. They're pretty trendy. And he played amazing in the bubble. I mean, he was fantastic. And like I said, he got squeezed on playing time because they brought in some vets. If he has a big playoff moment, his prices will soar. And you could probably, we'll call that a semi-quick flip because you're buying now and you're selling in less than 6 months. So I really think you could go both ways on him. And at that price point, all day, $50 for a PSA 10 Prism, I'm there if the guy has a pulse. And I think Cam Johnson has more than a pulse. That pick was not popular when made. No one thought it was good. And he has proven everybody wrong. He has played fantastic. So he's the last one on my list. I could have gone a bunch of different ways with this, but I kind of wanted to spread this around to 2 no-brainers, 2 kind of off the walls, and kind of a long-term / prospecty guy. So is there anyone you feel like I missed, or is there someone that you are intrigued about? Let me know down below. But other than that, YouTube nonsense down there too. While you're down there leaving a comment, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.